All right, welcome back to another episode of Life-Changing Challengers. As always, I'm your host, Brad Minus, and today I am extremely lucky to have Alan Lazaros on the podcast today. He is the CEO of Next Level University, and we're going to let him go into that, but let me tell you something. If you ever get a chance to take a look at the website and listen to the podcast at Next Level University, you're going to be amazed. So he's a podcaster with over 1,700 episodes. So the guy's a pro, let me tell you that. Anyway, I've introduced him now. Alan, hey, how you doing today?
I'm very well. It's going to be, number one, I do not take it lightly to be here. Thank you. I started listening to podcasts 9 years ago, and they definitely helped me change the trajectory of my life. And now I'm one of those people who's helping people do that. So it's really a dream come true to be here. Thank you. And number two, after that intro, I hope I don't let everyone down. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, possible. Anyway, so again, same question I ask every week. Alan, can you tell us a little bit about your childhood, the environment you grew up in, the complement of your family, and what it was like?
Okay, so the first thing that I want to make as clear as possible, when I started listening to podcasts 9 years ago, I would hear these eloquent speakers, and they would tell their narrative, and they would tell their story, and it seemed like they had it all figured out. And I used to think to myself, wow, I'm a mess in comparison. And now I realize I just was in my mid-20s, and everyone's a mess in their mid-20s. But anyways, when I tell this story, just understand that I didn't understand this stuff at the time. It's only in reflection. I often joke, I say I'm hoping to hit puberty at 36 because I look 12. But I'm going to try to condense 35 years into this episode. So that's going to be a challenge, but just realize that I didn't understand all this at the time. The really good analogy.
It's funny, right?
It is.
Yeah.
The good analogy is if you've ever seen a movie as a kid and then you rewatch the movie as an adult, now you get it at a different level, right? The movie didn't change, but you did. So that's really the metaphor. Okay, so started off in adversity, for sure. When I was 2 years old, my father passed away in a car accident when he was 28. His name was John McCorkle. My real last name is actually McCorkle, not Lazarus. So Lazarus is my stepfather's last name. So when my father passed away at 28, my mom was 31, my sister was 6, I was almost 3. So I was raised by my mom and my older sister, but my stepdad was in the picture from age 3 to 14. And when we were the Lazaruses, I took his last name, I think, around age 7. We were trying to be the Lazaruses, so we didn't really talk or associate much with the McCorkles anymore. Now, my birth father, John McCorkle, was a part of a big Irish Catholic family. So I actually got asked yesterday on a podcast, are you Greek? I get this all the time. No, I don't look Greek at all. I'm Irish, Polish, German, Scottish, right? And people always ask, Lazarus, are you Greek? No, that's my stepdad was Greek. My birth father came from a big Irish Catholic family, and it was all J's. So my mom and papa, his father and mother, had 6 kids. He was one of 6. It was Jim, Joe, John, Jane, Joan, Jeanette. All J, 6 kids. Yep. And so my father passed away at 28. My stepfather came into the picture, and when we were the Lazaruses, we didn't associate much with the McCorkles. And that'll make sense soon. So I often refer playfully to 3 to 14 as boats and BS. My stepfather was big into hunting, fishing, snowmobiles, motorcycles, trucks. We lived on a lake. It was late 90s, early 2000s, dot-com bubble-ish time. He worked for a company called AGFA, and they did hospital computers, so we did very well financially, but he and my stepmom did not get along, and that's a very polite way to put it on a public medium. And so at 14, he left, and I went from like Xbox, Dreamcast, early Christmas presents, boats, ski trips, deep-sea fishing. We literally had a yacht. Modest yacht, but still a yacht, to now I get free lunch at school because our income is so low. My mom traded in her BMW for a Honda. I shop at Salvation Army now for clothing. Now, we're not going to starve, but it was definitely a different life. So he leaves at 14. He gets the apartment building and the yacht. We get the house and the dog. And my sister at that same time moves out with her older boyfriend. And so it's just me and my mom in that house by ourselves. kind of the man of the house by 14, right? At that same time, my mom gets in a fight with my Aunt Sandy, her sister Sandy, and my Aunt Sandy ostracizes us from her side of the family. Yeah. And again, I didn't realize any of this until my 30s when I started reflecting on my life and realizing like, whoa. So 14 was by far the hardest year of my life. I lost 3 families by the time I'm 14. I've never spoken to a single person on my stepfather's side, including him, except for on Facebook Messenger. I've messaged him a little bit, but I've never seen him in person. The McCorkles, fortunately, my birth father's side, welcomed us back with open arms once my stepdad left, but it was like them seeing a ghost because I looked just like my dad. But my mom's side of the family, I've never seen any of them since, except for one of my cousins, Jeff, who came back 8 years later. So by the time I'm 14 years old, I lost 3 families in a way.
It's like your whole support system just faded away.
Yeah, scaffolding just out from under. Yeah, it was. But now here's, again, in hindsight, I did the only trauma response that I knew how to do, and I wasn't doing this consciously because I didn't even know what trauma responses were back then. But there's 4 trauma responses. There's fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. Fawn was the one I didn't understand. Fawn is like, don't poke the bear, do whatever the bear wants. It's appease. It's the appeaser. So I did a lot of fawning socially, especially when my stepdad and mom weren't getting along. But I also did fight. And by fight, I don't mean fight against others. I did work harder, aim higher, get smarter. That was my trauma response. The past is painful. The present is painful. I'm going to go into the future and I'm going to build the biggest, brightest future I can think of. Now, part of that was true self. The other part of that was get attention and love from my mom or stepdad, right? That kind of thing. And again, I didn't know any of this at the time. So anyways, I bootstrapped. I mean, I went from, I can't wait to go to college. I remember when I was 10 years old, I was driving past WPI, Worcester Polytechnic Institute. It's a technical college in Worcester. It's like a mini MIT in Massachusetts. And it's one of the best tech schools in the world. And it was $50,000 a year back then. And I remember thinking, I'm going to be an engineer. I love math and science, and I'm going to do this thing. And when my stepdad left, I remember thinking, how the hell am I going to go to college that's $50,000 a year? So even if I get into my dream school, how am I going to go, right? So I ended up getting the President's Award. It's actually behind me. It's signed by George W. Bush. And basically it means you get straight A's on every report card, all 4 report cards for 16 report cards straight all through high school. And I did. I got 189 in honors English. And luckily it was weighted because it was an honors class. So I still got the award, but I'll never take honors English again, I'll tell you what. But anyways, so I got into the school and I was the obnoxious kid at the award ceremony that just never sat down. Just award. Just you might as well not sit down because you get all the awards. So I got straight A's through high school. I got tons of financial aid and tons of scholarships, thankfully. So I was able to go. And then my mom helped me out as well. So I went to a $50,000 a year school, Worcester Polytechnic Institute, that was 30 minutes north. And I got my computer engineering bachelor's. And then I got my master's in business. And then I went off into corporate. And I had 2 dreams when I was a kid. I had a bunch of dreams. All of us do. I used to say all of us do. Now I realize that's actually pretty rare. But I had 2 main ones. So I used to not say this because I used to be too much of a coward. But genuinely, I remember having these actual thought processes. I was either going to do lawyer, politician, president, or I'm going to do engineer, MBA, Fortune 50 CEO of a tech company, like my hero at the time, Steve Jobs. Me and my friend used to argue who was smarter, Bill Gates or Steve Jobs, the whole Apple Microsoft thing, right? And so I just wanted to aim as high as you can aim. And so I chose, obviously, engineer, MBA, Fortune 50 CEO. So once I went into corporate, I went from a broke high school student to a broke college student to basically, I'm a computer engineer in the 21st century from a top school. I passed up an interview at SpaceX. I just did really well. So I went from 65 to 85, 85 to 105, 105 to 125, 125 to almost $200,000 a year. So I'm a top 1% global earner, not US earner, but global earner. I'm in my early 20s to mid 20s. I paid off $84,000 worth of college debt in a single year. I bought a 2004 Volkswagen Passat in $5,000 cash because I just decided to get wealthy. And I was so used to being broke that I don't need nice things. And so I also had $150,000 in an investment account for Vanguard of just all tech companies, because to me, tech made perfect sense. Like, why wouldn't you invest in tech? So I made a bunch of money in the stock market, and I'm in my mid-20s, and I have a beautiful girlfriend named Courtney. I live on a lake, and my rent is $500 a month. We split it. It's a tiny little place, right? I don't have kids. I don't have a mortgage. I drive a $5,000 car I bought in cash, and I'm making tons of money at this point. Again, tons relative to being a kid in his early 20s. And so I'm off to the races. But here's the thing. I'm super successful. I'm very professionally developed, resume, cover letter, LinkedIn, engineer, master's, bachelor's of science, all this stuff. I now call it STEMBIF, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, business, and finance. Those always came naturally to me. But I was deeply unfulfilled. I was drinking too much and too often. I had high school friends and corporate friends and college friends. I hadn't dealt with the trauma of my past. I didn't do much inner work. I didn't have a therapist. I was mostly achievement-oriented, and I was improvement-oriented, but I wasn't self-improvement-oriented. So the car accident that I got in changed everything. So I'm in New Hampshire with my little cousin in the Volkswagen Passat. Thank you, Volkswagen. I'll explain why in a minute.
Oh, no, I can already know that one.
Right? Yeah, so we're playing Call of Duty. We're not drinking or anything crazy. We're going to TGI Fridays, and this is actually the second cousin. So this is the cousin who came back from my mother's side 7 years later, and I was with him, my little cousin, second cousin, so his kid. So anyways, he's like 17. I'm in my early 20s. We're playing Call of Duty. We're going to TGI Fridays, both in the front seat. There's a three-way intersection, and this is back in 2015 when the snowbanks were covering the signs. It was a really bad winter up in New Hampshire, and I was supposed to yield. I didn't. I end up on the wrong side of the road. I look down from the GPS, and I see what I thought was a Mack truck in front of me, and right in front of our car. So I'm like, this is it. This is the end. My computer engineering brain went, done. No possibility we survive this. It's impossible. Like, this is the end. And for anyone who hasn't had that moment, it's the scariest thing in the entire world. It's inexplicable. It happened in a millisecond, but it also is like emotionally still there. It's weird. But fortunately, two things saved my life. Number one, the Volkswagen Passat. I used to call this car the tank. This is a German-engineered steel trap of a car that I actually called the tank. It was a heavy car. So thank you, Volkswagen, seriously, because you saved my life. Now, number two thing that saved my life is it wasn't a Mack truck. It was a lift-kitted pickup truck, lots of those in New Hampshire. And so the hood completely crumbled, but the frame didn't. The airbags deployed. My cousin hurt his knee on the airbag. I hurt my face in the airbag, but physically we were okay. He's a young 17-year-old, still invincibility complex. He was tweeting about it like right away. I'm physically okay, but remember, my dad died in a car accident when he was 28. I'm 26 at this time, questioning my entire existence, because this is the second chance my dad never got. And by this point, I've heard stories about John my whole life, particularly when my McCorkle family came back into my life after 14. And so I'm sitting there, this is quarter-life existential crisis. What was the point? What is the meaning of life? What is the meaning of my life? Filled with regret. Now, in hindsight, I didn't make worse choices than any other kids, for the most part. But I had that visceral, deep mortality moment of regret of like, wow, I have really not maximized my potential. I'm not super proud of the man I've become. I don't know if my dad would be proud of me. I don't know if I'm proud of myself. I definitely didn't maximize my potential, not even close. And I'm making tons of money and I'm super successful, but like, what does it all mean? What's the point? So existential crisis, right? And existential, for those of you who don't know, is just a term that refers to what's the point of all this? Why are we here? What's your purpose? What's your meaning? What's your calling? Those kind of words that I think a lot of people feel are fluffy, but if you've had a mortality moment, it's not fluffy, it's real. And so pre-26, in hindsight, this is the way I describe it. And I didn't know this at the time. It's been 9 years since then. I'm almost 36. And I now understand that I was in one of these three buckets. So the first bucket prior to 26 is what I call the successful unfulfilled. I was professionally developed. I had hard skills up the wazoo. I was extremely smart. I was academically inclined. I was well credentialed. I was an engineer. And I was off to the races, and I was hardworking for the most part, statistically speaking. but I was not emotionally developed. I was not personally developed. I wasn't self-improvement oriented. I was improvement oriented and achievement oriented, but I wasn't self-improvement oriented. And so I was successful and unfulfilled. After 26, 9 years ago, I flipped the script and I flipped it hard. And I found self-improvement and I went all in. I'm talking fitness, health, wealth, love, self-reflection, self-improvement, personal development, personal growth, every book I could get my hands on, I just went all in. And then I went all the way past broke because I quit corporate. I started my own company called...
Wait, hold on. Wait a second. We need to step back here a second. Okay. So I understand flipping the script, right?
Mm-hmm.
My clients do that consistently and something I'm super proud of. But you are telling me that you were making over $200,000 a year. And okay, so I get the unfulfilled part, but you basically like went from the accident to, okay, I need to do something different, and you quit.
Mm-hmm.
Just flat. That's a completely interesting thing that I think is very well, it's something that we need to delve into. And when you're going to, and I didn't get that. I got to step back one more second. So when you said regret, and you also mentioned, we talked about hindsight 2020, right? When you go back into where you were, your head was in that moment where you say regret, what exactly do you think that you regretted besides the whole fulfillment thing? Because from the outside, you're right. We all look at you. You made your parents proud. You made your mom proud. You are definitely academically the whole bit. You're doing these great projects. I'm imagining. I haven't talked to you about that yet. We'll talk about that in a minute. What exactly are you regretting at that point?
I want to share this. So recently I was on a podcast with a man named Jimmy, and this will articulate what I regretted. Jimmy has autism, and Jimmy had me on, and it was a wonderful interview. And he is promoting, and again, I don't know enough to talk intelligently about this, but he has a podcast, and he's putting in work, and he is working on himself, and he's just awesome. I had a blast on the podcast. And I had this moment when I was being interviewed by Jimmy, and I saw how much effort he's putting in. And I sat there and I was like, I know people who have potential that are so much higher than what Jimmy was given. But Jimmy is maximizing his potential more than half the people I know. If not, honestly, more than 95% of the people I know. We're all born with different gifts and different potential, right? LeBron James in basketball, a great example. So what do I regret? I regret, yeah, I was academically inclined, and yeah, I was really smart, and yeah, I got straight A's, but I didn't try that hard. I'm just really smart. And so I regret not maximizing. Why do I deserve these gifts? Like, I was proving textbooks wrong when I was a kid. I built my first computer when I was 12, right? I drank too much and too often. I did drugs. I frolicked too much. I didn't maximize my contribution to humanity. And I don't know if this will resonate with anyone else. I don't think it probably will. Maybe not no one, but I always knew, because everyone else said, like, you're so hardworking, you're so amazing, and it's like, no, you don't understand. Like, I know you think so, and I'm grateful. Thank you but you're projecting your standards onto me. Like, I was the kid that could party all night, not go to a single calculus class, and get straight A's in all the calc classes. So it's all relative, right? So Jimmy was putting more on the court than I was back then, and that is unacceptable. Because I had this moment on the podcast, and I'll only use first names because, of course, I want to protect everyone's privacy, but I had this moment on the interview that was sad. It was a sad moment, and I felt sad for him because he's working so hard to win in podcasting. He's working so hard to be successful. And I am going to succeed more than him forever at almost everything, even with very minimal effort. And I got sad. And then after sadness, I said, you know what, Alan? How dare you not make change in this world when you are given so much more than other people? Now, let me be completely transparent with you. People see me now, and I get it, right? born in the biggest economy in the world, which by far the US is like a large majority of the economy in terms of country to country, okay? White Caucasian American male, I get it, okay? I get it. I had two advantages in life. Most people think I was born on third base. The truth is, I couldn't even see the damn ballpark, okay? But no one knows that, especially not now. I had two huge advantages. Number one, and I never used to say this because I never used to have the courage, but I read a book called The Hidden Habits of Genius, and it's behind me. And it's a Yale professor who has studied geniuses throughout history, who, by the way, a lot of geniuses are awful human beings when you study them, by the way. Holy crap. But he studied the geniuses throughout history, and he brought up the 14 character traits of a genius, quote unquote. And he did this course called The Hidden Habits of Genius for 30 years at Yale, and then he wrote a book about it. And I didn't find this book until my 30s, by the way. And I looked at the character traits, and he opened the book with this quote that I'll never, and I'm paraphrasing, so it's not verbatim quote, but he opened the book with, geniuses don't know they're geniuses. They're too busy doing genius shit. Only a non-genius could go and do this work. Because geniuses are too busy just going and being geniuses. They don't really get it. And I had this moment of like, you know the thing that you know on the soul level, but yet you need this external validation to verify it? And who's this self-proclaimed genius? Like, I'm scared to even say it, but I do know it's true. Like, inside of me, I've always had an advantage in pretty much everything. Now, not athletically, right? I'm not going to beat LeBron James at basketball. I wasn't born on a ski mountain. Like, there's certain advantages I just don't have. I'm not strong. I'm not very strong. But intellectually, it's very clear to me. I grew up and I really used to think this. Why is everyone so lazy and so unintelligent? When in reality, they're not lazy and unintelligent. I'm really intelligent and really hardworking. And if you're wrong about one thing, you're wrong about everything. And I was wrong about everything, but I didn't know it. And so the two advantages I had in life is, number one, I was gifted with this huge brain, like super powerful brain. Everything feels easy for me. Like mathematics just made sense. It's good. Hunting's a good analogy, but yeah. And then number two, I was born in a country that invests in powerful minds. I got straight A's in high school, but I didn't have to try that hard. I had a colleague of mine, colleague. She's a friend. Her name was Tara, and she used to get pissed off. She'd say, it pisses me off. I study for 10 hours, teach it to you in 10 minutes, and then you do better than I did. And I never understood, because in my head, we're friends, so why not, right? I now understand how frustrating that is for someone who has to work so hard for things. And so, truth be told, I regret not doing more with what I have. I have been gifted with those two gifts. Without financial aid and without scholarships, I would not have been able to go to one of the best technical colleges in the world. And I wouldn't have met all the friends I met, and I wouldn't have gotten out of the small town and the small-minded crap that I grew up in. And let me tell you this too, and this is the duality. I had two advantages, but I'll tell you what, I only had two. And that's something most people don't know, especially if you see me now. All right?
So okay, I'm sorry. I didn't want to break you here, but I just wanted to break down this idea. So basically what you're saying is you could get straight A's just by listening. You were able to, I wouldn't call it a didactic memory, but you were able just to learn things, which is different than having a didactic memory. Didactic memory meaning that you can regurgitate, but yet you might not learn it. You actually had the ability to learn things very easily. Mm-hmm. So just to give a parallel analogy, if anybody's ever read anything, if maybe you have on David Goggins, mm-hmm. when he did his first 100-miler, right? This guy could run a 7-minute mile without a problem. He could do it for 25 miles without an issue, right? So he decides to go on this 100-miler. He gets to a point where he wants to so badly, he actually has to tape up his shins and his feet in duct tape in order to put them in a certain position so he can keep going. That is the effort to keep going, to keep moving forward. And That's an effort level where you in the same situation, obviously you say they weren't athletic, but saying that you had the same as that gift, you would have been able to run that 100 miles without a problem and and didn't have an issue. I just want to put that out there for people because some people we just don't understand that. What do you mean? You got straight A's. You had to work hard. No, it's not true. What you're saying? But it was what you're saying. That's what I'm getting from it.
I had to make sacrifices that other kids didn't have to, but I'd be lying to myself and to you if I said it was hard.
Okay.
It was hard compared to like hanging out all the time, but it wasn't hard compared to what it would have taken Jimmy. And that's just the reality that no one goes near anymore. Like, people want to believe that we're all equal potential. It's not genetically true. It's never been true. It's not true. And everyone knows that too. I struggle socially because everyone thinks I'm arrogant, when in reality, I'm actually dialing it down. Like, if you think I'm confident, like, this is me dialing it down out of social cowardice. Like, David Goggins is extremely gritty, but he's not naturally intelligent.
Right.
I happen to have a lot of grit because he came up hard like I did. And again, I don't want to compare because, again, he definitely came up hard. But real talk, like between you and I asked my therapist once, there's something called an ACE score, Adverse Childhood Experiences. And there's decades of research on this. And you can take an ACE test and I finally had the courage to ask my therapist after 6 or 7 months or 8 months or something like that. Like, I needed to know, because I already knew on the soul level. I said 0 to 10 on a bell curve. And this is how I think. I think in bell curves. I think in exponentials. Like, nothing in the world is linear, even though we think linearly. It's, anyways, I can't get into that. But I asked her, I said, you know me well enough now. You know my past. You understand what I've been through to a great extent. Where am I at? There's things called little t trauma and big T trauma, and trauma overall. Where am I at on the bell curve? Like, 10 is the most you've ever seen of trauma, and 0 is the least you've ever seen. And I already knew the answer. And she had the courage to actually tell me too. And she said, Alan, it's the highest I've ever seen. Due to the chronic nature of your trauma, it's the highest I've ever seen. And I know what that means. She's been a clinician for 10, 15, 20 years. So she hears the worst of the worst. And I bawled my eyes out because I already knew. That's why I asked the question. I knew that. So I bawled my eyes out and I felt freer after that. It was like, okay, awesome. What am I going to do about it? I'm going to accept it for what it was, and I'm going to build something great out of it. And I'm going to be the male role model I never had. And I'm going to lead by example because, quite frankly, and this is so hard to say, but it's true, and there's some good parts of my childhood. I need to make it clear. There's some good parts, okay? But honestly, where I grew up, it was nothing but people that are completely full of shit. And I hated it. I saw deeply unfulfilled people. I saw deeply unfulfilled marriages. I saw tons of drugs and alcohol. And I saw what I consider the boulevard of broken dreams. And I decided, nope, not me. And my therapist has told me, if it wasn't for your genius, you never would have made it out of that. And I think that's probably true. And so now I have more empathy than I could have before because truth be told, everyone listening right now or watching this, you already know I don't struggle with self-doubt that much. I don't feel not good enough. I don't feel not smart enough. Like, there's only been a handful of people that I've ever been around where I'm like, oh my God, are you smarter than me? Like, holy crap. I remember I had that moment with someone and I told my girlfriend about it because she's brilliant as well. And I was like, did you have that moment of like, is this person smarter than me? And she's like, yeah. I said, I bet people have that all the time around us. See, even this is scary because no one's going to relate to any of this. Okay. One of my mentors is the CEO of one of the biggest robotics companies in the world. Like, it's a different game. I'm playing a different game, and I didn't know this. You met Kev, okay? Mm-hmm. Kev's the one who taught me all this. He said, dude, that's a you thing. He said, no one turns down an interview at SpaceX. Like, what is up with this? I said, for me, dude, that has always been there, so it's not. But let me share this, okay? There's two types of courage. There's competence courage, which is apply to the job. apply to the school, do the interview, do the speech, show up, do the resume, write the letter, write the email. Okay, that's competence, courage. Can you do it? Are you good enough, smart enough, capable enough, competent enough? That is fine for me. I've never had a problem with that. In athletics, I have a little bit. I'm not naturally as gifted in athletics. Okay. Over here is social courage. Social courage is have the courage to be all of what you are in public, around the people that are insecure around you. Have the courage to call someone out. I remember one time I was with a mutual friend of Emil and I, and I'll just keep it anonymous, but he's like, oh, nowadays, the only way to make money is real estate. And I had this moment of like, that's got to be the dumbest thing I've ever heard. That arrogant, it's like tech companies, like look at all the top companies. Google, Facebook, Amazon, like none of them are real estate companies. Now, they own real estate, but it's just, if that statement was ever not true, it's now. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so I didn't say anything because I'm a coward. Because I know I'm smarter than him. He knows I'm smarter than him, but he's insecure about his intelligence. So what am I going to do? Do this? And every time I ever called anyone out for anything, because I was more accurate than they were, because I'm more intelligent, they hated me. And then I felt unlovable. So I became more of a coward. So Kevin and I give a speech, and we speak together. He's afraid he's not going to add value. I don't have that fear at all. I'll get you thinking differently. I'll get you more successful, assuming you don't hate me. If you told me, Alan, you have to give a speech in front of 1,000 people and you have to add value, no problem. I'm your guy. Let's rock. If you say you have to make everyone not hate you, I would say that is literally impossible. That's not possible. You see my energy shift? It's not possible. I'm going to trigger everyone in this room. I'm going to get them believing in themselves more. I'm going to get them to aim higher. But they know I'm not like them. They know I don't struggle with self-doubt. I used to not have the courage to say it. I did a marathon on 3 days' notice, and that was the first time I had felt self-doubt in like a couple months. And I was literally 3 days' notice, 95-degree weather, on a track by myself with a phone in my hand.
What?
Yeah. I didn't run it. Some of it I had to walk because it was brutal, and it was 95 degrees. But yeah, I did that. The first half marathon was actually easy. The full marathon was awful. I was actually cocky in the middle. Emilia has a video of me like running backwards. Stupid. But
you did this on a track?
I did on a track, yeah. 95-degree weather is brutal. My ears will never be the same. I forgot sunblock on them.
Oh my God.
Yeah. But again, the point that I want to make with all that is that I think that we all are either, this is Kevin's quote, and it's the best I've ever heard. You are either afraid that all of you is not enough, or you are afraid that all of you is too much. We all have both to some extent, but I'm 99.9% the second one. I'm afraid that all of me is too much. I'm not afraid that I'm not enough. I don't feel not enough. That's never resonated. When I was a kid, I used to wonder, like, why do I feel like I'm good at everything? I didn't understand. I just didn't get it. And so the truth of the matter is, it's more scary for me to talk about my strengths than it is my weaknesses. I'll tell you every weakness under the sun. Right. But remember, it's not socially acceptable to be better than other people, especially as kids. You know how when you're a kid and you're playing a board game and your friends don't even want to win, they want to make sure you lose? Yeah, that's been my experience. And so most people are deeply insecure and feel like they're not enough. So when they get around someone who doesn't have that issue, a lot of times they lash out. And I dealt with a lot of bullying and that kind of thing. And also, truth be told, when I say I'm going to, be lawyer, politician, president, or engineer, MBA, CEO, people are like, oh, another blowhard, like, nah.
Yeah.
The truth is they think I'm full of shit. And honestly, as I've gotten older, they've realized that I'm not as full of shit as they thought because I'm actually doing it, right? So.
No, it sounds like, yeah, it's definitely a whole different mindset. And it's a mindset that it's as much as you're successful and everything that's going on, it is a negative mindset as far as your social confidence.
Yeah.
And people don't, and that's where people don't, they tend to not realize that not.
Well, it's a smaller percentage of the population.
Yeah,
so
the
books aren't written for me. That's the other problem too. Like, I remember Emilia, because she's brilliant too, and she's her own level of genius. It's unbelievable. My beautiful girlfriend, been together for 5 years, and nothing's built for her. Like, these books aren't written for her. Like the books that teach you how to be more confident, Like, I don't need more self-belief. I need more humility. I don't need to, like, get outside your comfort zone. For me, doing a speech is not outside my comfort zone. What is outside my comfort zone is telling the truth in a speech. You see what I mean? There's no book on that.
Yeah.
There's no book on, hey, you need to own that you don't struggle with self-doubt. That book wouldn't sell. No one struggles with that statistically. Right? This is for your listeners. If you feel like you're not smart enough or not good-looking enough or not intelligent enough or not competent enough, you've always felt like you struggle to achieve things, maybe you have a sibling who's more capable than you and you know it, like that, then you're most likely afraid that all of you is not enough. And if you accept that and own that, ironically, paradoxically, you'll become enough. If you're not in that camp, I would say that's probably 97% of the population is more on that side.
Okay.
If you're in this other percentile, that doesn't resonate at all. None of that resonates, but you hide it, by the way. You don't tell anyone. Oh, yeah, no, I struggle. Like, yeah, it's not real. Okay. The other side is you don't feel like you naturally fit in. You feel like you have to chameleon everywhere you go. You don't feel relatable or likable at all. You feel like you get lashed out at for what seems like no reason all the time. You feel like no one wants to see you win. If that resonated, you are unbelievably amazing. You're amazing. And you're scared to be amazing. Because socially being amazing isn't awesome unless you're on their sports team. Like their sports team, right?
Our greatest fears should not be of failure, but of succeeding at things that don't really matter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Said on that. You've ever heard the quote of, "It is not our darkness, but our light that most frightens us"?
Right.
That quote resonates with me. That doesn't resonate with Kevin at all. Kevin's afraid of failure.
Right.
He's not, my greatness doesn't frighten me. My lack of greatness frightens me, right? And I'm not saying he's not great. I love Kev's great. But it's all the narrative in our own head based on our quantum abilities. And by quantum abilities, I mean what you were born with. Again, back to Jimmy is not afraid that he's too much for people. Maybe he is in his own way from the autism side, I don't know. But he is more likely frustrated that he feels incapable of some of the things that come naturally to us. And I applaud Jimmy. Jimmy's maximizing his potential more than I was. And this is the first time in my life, in my 30s, where I can say, I'm putting it on the court, man. I'm actually stretching, right? And if you can't say that, if you can't say you're doing all you can with all you have with a straight face, and I'm talking by yourself in the mirror, then you're not going to be fulfilled. And that's my thesis. And so far I've coached hundreds of people. I believe that to be true. But that looks different for everyone. That's why it gets confusing.
No. When I say to people that, hey, when you listen to my episodes and listening to the interviews that I give, and I say, I want you to take one nugget away. If you just take one nugget, then I feel like we've succeeded. That's the one right there. Is that if you're not maximizing your potential, using everything that you possibly can, then there's no way that you're going to feel fulfilled. And if you feel like you're doing that, most likely you don't know what being fulfilled feels like. So there's my question to you. What was the first time you felt fulfilled?
I think it's more of a spectrum than a 1 or a 0. So I would say it's like a staircase, but it's all relative. And Einstein wrote the theory of relativity, and Kevin told me no one cares, but I've read some of it and it's really good. But anyways, the point is that if you've never felt fulfilled, you don't really know what you're missing until you're fulfilled. Mm-hmm. So it's this weird thing where you climb this staircase and now you're level 6 fulfilled. And you realize, oh, maybe I'm actually a 2 because there's so much more to go, but I'm definitely a 6 compared to where I was before. And so to answer your question, I always ask my clients this, and this is the goal with my coaching. It's business coaching, but it's really how do I make you more successful and fulfilled? And not but, not or, and. I'm a computer engineer, so I think in logic. The idea here is, the question that I ask them is 0 to 10, how fulfilled are you right now? 10 means the most fulfilled you've ever been. 0 means the least fulfilled you've ever been, because everything's experiential. If you've never been fulfilled, but you're the most fulfilled you've ever been, maybe it's my 1, but for you, that's a 10. And usually they say around an 8, usually. And I know why. I say, okay, when were you a level 10? And then they go, and I said, when were you dialed in? You were on point. You were living. You were challenged, but you were contributing. You were growing. You were doing it. And they said, one of my buddies, he said, back when I was playing D1, D2 college football. And I said, let's analyze what was different. Okay, offensive coach, defensive coach, head coach, peers, common goals. You had belonging from the crowd. You were celebrated. You also had the chip on your shoulder because your grandfather said you're too small to play in the NFL. You have a dream that you're chasing. Like, there's certain principles that create fulfillment. And people say it's the journey, not the destination. It's both. If I drive 30 minutes south, that's very different than driving from Boston to LA, which I did in my early 20s. So the destination matters, but the journey is, the climb is what's fulfilling. So it's this,
Right.
Everything's like these dualities. And if you can't think in duality, you're in so much trouble. What is duality? There's a book called The Self-Made Billionaire Effect. And this is back when there was only 1,200 billionaires. There's like 3,300 now. And they said the number one quality of a self-made billionaire. So there's only 1,200 self-made billionaires. This was back in 2012. Didn't inherit it, like that kind of thing. And he said the number one quality of self-made billionaires is that they can hold two seemingly opposing ideas in their consciousness simultaneously. And I see that all the time. It's, you work too hard. Compared to what? And by the way, for my goals, I'm actually not hardworking enough, believe it or not. So yeah, you think I'm disciplined, you think I'm structured, you think I'm systems, you think I'm too rational, and I should need to live a little, right? You ever hear that? And it's, you're projecting onto me your own standard. Like, in order to achieve my goals, I'm actually not dialed in enough. And it's back to the fulfillment piece. Fulfillment looks different for everyone, but the principles are the same. And even that's a duality. Let me give you an example. Virtue is a principle. If you show compassion and I show compassion, we're going to be more fulfilled than if we don't. If you show greed and I show greed, we're going to be less fulfilled. But what that greed looks like, the amount, all of that changes based on the individual, the context, the goals, your upbringing, right? Axe can build a house or kill someone. It's not the axe that's the problem. It's the wielder. And so for all of us, people come to me and they say, how do I be more successful? It's like, listen, the reason you're not successful is because you've set goals based on a version of you that isn't real. Most people would look at my life and say, screw that. I work 12-hour days every day for 6 days a week, and Sunday is my only day off. And even that's not off. But that's what fulfills me. Trust me, I tried taking time off and stuff. That wasn't fulfilling for me. And so I podcast, coach, speak, train, and write, and I do events. Those are my 6. Those are my things I do. And they fulfill me, and they're my purpose, my calling, my passion. They're profitable. Someone else looks at my life and goes, oh my God. But then they look at my results and go, that would be nice. No. You don't understand what... You can't get those results without the process, without the systems, without the tools, without the beliefs, without the... maybe you want to spend more time with your friends than I do. I had to give up a lot of friendships in order to get to where I am. 1,700 episodes, you mentioned that. I appreciate it, and that sounds really cool. But the truth is, we do an episode every day. You have no idea. These are not like 3-minute clips. These are full 30-minute, anywhere from 20 to 40-minute episodes every single day. It's like, how do you do that? Kevin and I have decided to climb this mountain. And this is a fulfilling mountain for us. It's meaningful progress toward meaningful goals for a meaningful purpose. And it's our passion, it's our purpose, and it's our profit. And in that order. And you can't design your life based on what I've designed mine to be. And I can't design my life based on what you've designed yours to be, because neither one of us will be fulfilled or successful. Or maybe you'll be successful and unfulfilled, which is what I did prior to my car accident.
Interesting that you mentioned, and this blew me away, is that you said a lot of people have goals based upon a version of themselves that's not set in reality. That's huge. People to understand that. In your coaching, how do you get someone to understand that without tearing them down?
Yeah. So that's actually been one of my greatest challenges. What a great question, Brad. I appreciate it. So I have this framework. Everything's a framework to me. There's 4 modalities of thinking, by the way. The first one's math and numbers. The second is words and concepts. The third is energy. And the fourth is images and pictures. I'm math first, so anyone who's math first is like, I like this guy. Everyone who's not is like, he doesn't make any sense. I used to think I was a strong communicator. Now I know I'm a strong communicator to engineers. But anyways, so Kevin is words and concepts first, so he's more emotional, and we don't have to get into that. But the rarest is math, I think, statistically. The next rarest is energy. Words is by far the most common, is words and concepts, and then images and pictures is next. But anyways, so to answer your original question, everything's a framework. So I have this framework that I use, to try to understand human beings. And I have to close my eyes to look at it on a whiteboard. All right, so imagine a target. The outer ring is what you want others to believe about you. The next ring in is what you want to believe about you. And then the inner ring is what you really are.
Interesting.
My goal in life is to make all three of those rings the same. That means I'm in reality.
Right.
Because the GPS is a great analogy. The GPS needs three things. I have a Tesla that they've actually updated it to now it's not as good self-driving. It still drives itself, but it's called supervisor mode. But Emilia and I went on a road trip from Massachusetts to South Carolina to visit her fam bam. And we drove through 8 states. And I'm not kidding. I let this thing drive us there. It was the coolest thing ever. I've been waiting for this for a decade because I was robotics companies and computer engineering, right? So I know this is coming. A lot of people get freaked out. Listen, it's coming whether you like it or not. I'm sorry. Don't hate me. It was awesome. So anyways, the point is the Tesla has 9 cameras. So it has 3 in the front, 1 for the right, 1 for the left, 1 for the center. It has 1 in the rear, and then it has 1 in each door, 4 doors. And then there's 1 in the inside because if it sees you on your phone or whatever, it says, hey, pay attention, right? Now, I'm not talking about the privacy issues. I'm not talking about data. I'm not talking about Elon. No, don't associate me with any of this, please. Now, in the metaphor, in order for the Tesla to drive me somewhere, it needs 3 things. Number 1, it needs a current location, an accurate current location. It needs to know where it is in relative to other persons, places, things, and ideas, okay? Then it needs a destination address, okay? So in this metaphor, current location is self-awareness. The destination address is where you're headed, goal, dream, result, objective, whatever you want to call it. And it also needs, number 3, it needs to know the data of the terrain. Remember back in the day, the Garmin, and it would like not update, and you're trying to take a right, and it's like, that's not even a road, that's a lake. I feel like that's what people do in life. They set these goals, and then they drive into the lake over and over again, and then they have low self-worth and low self-belief, and they think something's wrong with them, when in reality, they're just inaccurate in their thinking. And then I come along trying to update their software and help them think accurately, and they hate me. And then I decide to bottle it all up, take all the answers, keep them to myself, just like all the other engineers that have low self-worth, that have all the answers and tell no one, right? Because it's not safe. And now we get all our goals and dreams, but we're these emotionally stunted children. And again, I'm being playful because I know a lot of engineers, but that's the problem, right? The people with the actual truth, the actual answers, aren't emotional. And so they don't learn how to communicate effectively with emotionally driven people. Because when someone says, hey, Alan, how do I look in this dress? And my brain says, you're level 6 fat. You can't say that. It's not safe to say that, even though that is the truth. Fat people are fat. Skinny people are skinny. Some houses are shacks and some are mansions. Like, you have to look at the world accurately, and you get villainized for it. But if you don't call a spade, you can't make good decisions without accurate data. And so here I live in this objective world in my head, and I can only share certain parts of it in the world without people hating me. Even on this podcast, I have to be careful, right? So to answer your original question, when someone comes to me in coaching, my job is threefold. The first is to get them to realize who they really are and what they really are. And how do you do that without tearing them down? This is why I tend to coach people who are under, not over. Let me explain. I'll use Jesse. Jesse's a past team member of mine, used to be a client. Love Jesse. Wonderful human being. Smarter than she thinks, better looking than she thinks, more competent than she thinks. That's easy for me. It's not hard for me to say you're better than you think.
Right.
It's the ego-driven ding-dongs that think they're smart that it's hard for me to say, I know you think you're accurate, like the real estate thing. Mm-hmm. But you can't make good decisions. If that's the case, go invest in real estate while I invest in tech. See how that goes, right? Especially commercial real estate when no one needs headquarter buildings anymore, right? So here I am. I keep the answers for myself. I go be successful. He goes, makes poor decisions because I never update his data. And then he likes me more or hates me more? Unconsciously, right? Yeah. And then what does that do to my unlovable part, right? And so at the end of the day, I try to coach people who are under, meaning they are more competent than they think, they're smarter than they think. They've been conditioned to think they're less than they are. And I'm really good at coaching those people. I have trouble with the ego-driven narcissists who like think they're awesome when they're just not. You're just not. You need to go humble yourself. You need to go do some hard stuff. I did a timed mile recently, and I thought I'd get a 6. I ended up with a 7:09, and I was trucking. And I'm 35, and I was like, oh my God, talk about humble pie. But I need the humble pie, because otherwise I get arrogant. A lot of people do. They get really arrogant. They haven't challenged themselves at the core level enough, especially successful people. Like, listen, when you have 50 grand a month coming in, and all your friends are not successful like you, it's very easy to become very arrogant. But that's how you end up not humble and not courageous and not vulnerable and not honest. And that's how you end up delusional. We all are victim of being delusional in one direction or the other. You either are better than you think or you're worse than you think. No one's fully accurate. Everyone thinks they are, which is why no one is. It's this whole thing. And so my job is to see them as accurately as possible, as objectively as possible, knowing there's a percent error and that I'm not all-knowing, and then help them see that so that they can set goals based on that are actually in alignment with who they really are. That's how you win. And if you think you're super smart and then you go to SpaceX, you're in some serious trouble. I thought I was smart before I went to college, and I was smart, but like, whoa, I was like, holy crap. I was like the math guy. Now I'm like the guy, just regular guy. I'm just regular guy now. You just have to keep on getting feedback. But most people avoid feedback because they're deeply insecure.
And that's an interesting subject within itself, and we could probably go on for hours about that. The sensitivity that's going on in our environment today is ridiculous. It's far upscale than we need to talk about. I'm one of those guys that I guess I have empathy for other people, but I don't have empathy for myself. Mm-hmm. So I want you, like, if you were coaching me and I'm probably an under, or I don't know what I am, but if you were coaching me, I want you to sit there and look at me in the face and go, no, dude, you are so far below what you think you're going to be able to do that we need to come up with something that's going to put you in the success factor in the person that you are. I need to see that. I need to hear that. I tell my bosses all the time, I'm listen, you know what? If I effed up, you need to come in my office, look at me in the face and said, you effed up, now fix it. I don't need you to sit there and say, this didn't really work out and we need to push back on this a little bit and blah, blah, blah. No, I need you to come in there, tell me you effed up. If you need help, let me know, but you need to fix it and you need to do it now and walk out the door.
But Brad, that's because you have high self-belief. This is the problem with fixed and growth mindset. And I see you. Trust me, same. Just tell me. I don't want you to... Kevin called me fat once. And people in our community don't understand why. He knew I was delusional. They're like, you're in great shape. Compared to who, though?
Right.
Kev remembers when I was in way better shape than this. Like, Kev was there when we were doing fitness competitions, and I would eat me right now. Right? So he's not calling me fat to be mean. He knows I'm delusional, and he knows that I'm underperforming. But he would never say that to someone who's actually fat. That's the duality.
Yes.
Because that's unkind to someone who doesn't have the belief that I have and the competence I have. Like, I had a client once who came to me and said, I want you to be as hard on me as you are on yourself. And Emilia, my beautiful girlfriend, who has the most self-belief of anyone I've ever met, I told her that, and she said, oh, she would die. You can only give the level of, like, you don't treat a 7-year-old the same as a 70-year-old. Like, if I'm brand new at chess, are you going to berate me that I didn't do the bishop to king perfect setup? No, of course not. The fact that I even know what the pieces do is a win. But if I've been playing chess for 10 years and I'm losing to 10-year-olds, come on, man, what are we doing here, right? So there's toxic positivity, which is, it's all going to work out, no worries, regardless of your effort, everybody gets a trophy. And there's toxic negativity, which is, you're the worst, grind every day, how dare you, no compassion. The optimal solution is always in the middle. And so you have high self-belief, so you can take direct feedback. People who have low self-belief and fixed mindsets have trouble with that because they already beat themselves up so much, and they actually need more affirmation. Not all of them. Some people need to be told, like, listen, I know you think you're hot shit. Come on, man. What are we doing? Like, you need to go run with someone who's an actual runner, okay? Get humble pie. Everyone needs, and this is the problem, the medicine that cures one patient kills another. That's why I love one-on-one coaching, and this is why podcasting is so hard for me. If you're a computer engineer out there listening, and you have high self-belief, you love this episode. And most likely, if you have low self-belief and low self-worth, and you struggle to think accurately, and you feel like you're not smart enough, you have a really hard time with me and Brad right now. And this is why like attracts like. But the problem is that we all end up in these echo chambers. Kevin and I have really broken each other's echo chamber because we've combined these two worlds of the computer engineers and the heart-driven people who were blue-collar, right? And so we've learned the opposite bell curve, the opposite side of the bell curve, and we've become holistic because of it. And so I've learned so much from Kev just because Kev's so different than me. But we have similar core values and similar core aspirations. And we respect each other, and we both didn't have fathers, and we also had a common core wound of wanting male role models, never having them, right? So there's a lot underneath that. But at the end of the day, you want direct feedback because you have high self-belief. But no one knows how they built their self-belief. There's an actual formula. It's state-proved self-assign. So Brad, you say, I'm going to do a marathon. And then you prove to yourself you can do it. And then after you're done, you go, I told you I could do it. And so you build belief. Other people aren't stating and they're not self-assigning.
And that's something I'm oblivious to.
Yes, because you have self-belief and you don't know that you have it. And all the people around you are pretending they have it too. And only the fact that you're not insecure around me means you have very high self-belief.
You know what? I get it. Because I know that
you can't do 37 half marathons, 17 full marathons. Like you need self-belief for that.
Yeah, but I accept the fact that you are a very smart person and you're probably much smarter than I am, and I accept the fact. And when I hire people, let me just give you just a little bit. I am actually in IT myself. I work for a surgery center right now, but I've worked for JP Morgan. I've worked for some of the biggest Fortune 100 companies as a project. IT project program manager, blah, 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 blah. When I hire people, I know that I want to hire people that are smarter than me, much smarter than me.
Got it.
I need that knowledge in order to get the project moving into a point that I can be successful and I can take it. Let me take care of the budgeting, the scheduling, and all that stuff.
Yep.
You take your knowledge and build me my freaking application.
As long as they're humble. As long as they're humble. Because a lot of times the people smarter than you sometimes aren't humble and therefore not coachable, and they can't be led. I've come to realize as a leader, if you're not humble, I can't work with you at all. Because if you're not humble, you're not coachable. And if you're not coachable, we're in trouble. Right? And so, again, that's another layer. Sorry to interrupt you, but those I'm talking about are probably brilliant, but they're also low self-worth and they have a lot of humility probably.
That's super interesting because even in my interviews, when I'm getting somebody across the table to bring out to my teams, I'm like, no, I am in this business to hire people that are smarter than me. As far as your resume goes and what you've accomplished, it looks like you fit that bill. Now let's talk about what it was. And a lot of times you're absolutely right. They all of a sudden their eyes go down.
Yep.
And they tuck their head in and blah, blah, blah. Like they can't take that compliment or they actually don't believe it.
Yes. Yep. And ironically, that's why they're so smart. Because if they did think they were smart, they wouldn't work on getting smarter. Everything's a paradox.
That's super interesting too. If you know you're smart, you're not going to work on becoming smarter. There's a lot of great takeaways here, ladies and gentlemen. And you know what? We can probably go on forever about this. As far as there was something that you were talking about earlier, we'll go on to that later. But so just as far as chronology goes, before we start to wrap this up, you got out of corporate and you started to really delve into personal development. How long was it before when you quit your job, started moving into this personal development stuff after the accident that you started next level? Or was that the next step in your journey here? Or was there something in the middle?
No, there was a couple things that I do think are critical for anyone listening. One was back in 2012, I started a little company called Campus Libre. It was going to be a campus-specific Craigslist for textbooks. It started off as a little business competition at school, and we actually won a couple awards. But it was me and the three smartest engineers that I knew at the time. It was a 4-person team. We were profitable out of the gate, and me and the CEO had a falling out. I was the CMO, Chief Marketing Officer.
Okay, Mark Zuckerberg.
Yeah. Honestly, it's funny that you say that because the movie that came out, I was watching it back then thinking this could be a big deal. There was a competitor called ULoop. It was a campus-specific Craigslist for textbooks, and then it was eventually going to be like a not just textbooks. And then we were going to go from the East Coast to the West Coast and then fill in the gaps, and then we were going to move beyond U.S. But anyways, me and the CEO had a falling out, and it was one of the hardest conversations I've ever had. I was crying for freaking 4 hours because I poured my heart and soul into this. And now I realize, too, by the way, that I'm a naturally born entrepreneur. I am obsessive. I'm extremely organized. There's a personality test called Hexaco that tests you on 26 facets of your personality, and one of them is called conscientiousness, and I'm very high in conscientiousness, which is the most correlated with business success, not the most correlated with relational success, by the way. But anyways, so relationships always came hard to me. Success always felt easy. Most people are on the other end of that, statistically speaking, blah, blah, blah. But the point is I started a little company. It ended up failing, and it didn't go anywhere after that, which in some ways was like the ego part of me was like, yeah, I told you. And then the other part of me was, that's sad. But anyways, then I went into corporate, did the whole corporate thing, car accident at 26. After that, I reinvented myself completely. I went all in on self-improvement. It wasn't long after that. I started listening to books while on the road, going into all these manufacturing facilities because Cognex, the company I was working for, I was on the road. I managed Connecticut, Vermont, and Western Massachusetts. So I was on the road all the time just listening to audiobooks. And then I quit Cognex probably within 6 months, maybe even sooner. And then I started my own little company called Alan Lazaros, LLC. And it was what you'll never learn in school but desperately need to know. And so instead of taking jobs through industrial automation, which again is what it is, I decided to help people retool for a bigger, better, brighter future. And that's really where it was born. And that was 8.5 years ago. And then eventually I teamed up with Kev. So Kev had a podcast called the Hyperconscious Podcast, Change the Way You Think, Change the Way You Act, Change the Way You Live. I had a podcast called Conversations Change Lives, which was meaningful conversations like this. Being a fly on the wall will change your life type of thing. And then I had him as my first guest. He had me as his first guest. And after that, we just started teaming up, and we had the worst named podcast ever. It was the Hyperconscious Podcast meets Conversations Change Lives podcast. It was awful. So eventually we went all in on the Hyperconscious Podcast. We were 1 a week, then we were 2 a week, then we were 3 a week. Eventually we were 5 a week, and then 7 a week. 1% improvement in your pocket every day now. And then we rebranded from Hyperconscious to Next Level University. So Next Level University was born probably, if it's been 9 years, Next Level University was born probably 4 years ago. And before that, it was 3 years of the Hyperconscious Podcast. So technically, Kevin and I are still a toddler in business. We're only 7 years old. We have a 21-person team now. We've got 21 departments. We've got our own charity, about to be 22 people, actually, as of yesterday. We got a big community now, heard in 170 countries, and we're still, in my opinion, in our very infancy. But we've got a lot of good stuff going on now. But ultimately, the point of all that, rather than just bragging about NLU, is who we are. The company is aligned with who we are now. My career wasn't as aligned with who I was as I thought, because it wasn't the passion and the purpose. And it was profit. Most people are profit first. Like, very last thing, I know we got to jump here. I wrote this blog recently about how to have a magnificent career that you adore. And it's a simple Venn diagram. And the bottom left circle of the Venn diagram is, there's 3 circles, is what fulfills you. Then number 2 is what you're really good at, statistically speaking. Like, I don't mean good at in your own head. Line up 100 people in a room. Are you the best in the room? And then number 3 is what makes great money. And I often joke, I say, how much money would Michael Jordan make to play basketball 100 years ago? And the answer is $0. The NBA is only 74 years old. And even in the beginning, there was very little money. There was no market, just no market, right? So I don't care how good you are at something that there's no market for. It doesn't actually pay the bills. But unfortunately, most of us go for money first. Particularly in the older generations, it was always money first. And then we try to be fulfilled. It's like, good luck with that, right? So that's what I did. Engineers make a lot of money. So let's go be an engineer. And then I'm sitting behind a desk all summer designing circuits going, I made a mistake. And obviously not a macro mistake, because computer engineering has been very lucrative and I'm grateful for it. But I had to reinvent myself. And so that's what I do for people now is you're either fulfilled and unsuccessful, which happens all the time, by the way, Or you're successful and unfulfilled, also happens all the time. Both of those suck. I've been there. Or you're like my client Yvette, who came to me and she said, listen, I love what I do. I'm really good at it. I want my life to be an amplified version of what it already is, but I don't want to work 12-hour days, 6 days a week like you do. I was like, okay, let's rock and roll. So I'm just helping her amplify what already is super successful in most people's eyes. Is she going to be a billionaire? No, but she's definitely going to be a multimillionaire, and she loves what she does. So at the end of the day, I've got 26 people on my roster. The youngest is 16. I'm actually on with him in 2 minutes. My oldest is 63, and it's been so awesome because it's people all over the world from all different backgrounds, and I'm coming up on my 10,000 hours, so I'm pumped about that. And thank you so much, Brad. This was awesome. This was great. I really appreciate it. And if anyone wants to reach out, they can.
I appreciate that, and I'll link your socials. I'm going to link nextleveluniversity.com. If you could send me the link to that blog, is that blog? Is it?
Yeah, it's on my LinkedIn.
Is it public?
It's
on your
blog
LinkedIn?
number 18.
Okay.
Yeah, so I have 18 blogs on my LinkedIn. Yeah.
Okay.
It's the latest and greatest one, yeah.
All right, so I will find that. I'm going to link that.
Thank you.
And we'll have that all. And then don't forget to check out Next Level University podcast. I'm assuming, according to everything on your website, it looks like it's everywhere you can find your podcasts.
Yes.
So you won't have a problem. You won't have a problem with that. But yes, no, this has been amazing, Alan. I really appreciate it. Please say hello to Kevin for me.
I will.
And you remind him that I was the guy sitting next to him for like 3.5 hours, the very first day of Podfest. And for the rest of you, we will see you in the next one. Have a good one.
It's been an honor, Brad. Thank you.
Appreciate it.